Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Miguel. Today we're taking a look at a watch brand that I never knew existed until a few weeks ago, and honestly it surprised me quite a bit. This is a new Cadola Slipstream Mecha-Quartz. Specifically, this is the Ashen Blast colorway, and for around the $220 price point, there's actually a lot going on here that I think enthusiasts are going to appreciate. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you guys already know I typically don't gravitate towards watches over 41 or 42 millimeters unless they're super avant-garde and tell time in a non-traditional way. However, for traditional looking timepieces, once a watch starts getting too large or too heavy, especially on my 6 and 7/8 inch wrist, I start losing interest pretty quick. But surprisingly, this one wears much better than I expected, and I think that's thanks to the vintage-inspired case design and relatively compact 46.5mm lug-to-lug measurement. And right away, the thing that stood out to me the most is the dial layout and overall construction. This watch absolutely nails that vintage motorsport aesthetic without feeling like a cheap homage or costume piece. The printing is crisp, the subdials are well balanced, and overall the watch just has a really cohesive look to it. It genuinely feels inspired by vintage racing chronographs from the 60s and the 70s, but without all the compromises that come with owning an actual vintage watch. Because let's be honest, vintage watches can be awesome, but they can also be fragile, difficult to service, lack of water resistance, and sometimes just become more stressful to own than enjoyable. This gives you a lot of that old school charm while still offering modern reliability and practicality. Cadola as a company leans heavily into motorsport inspired designs, and honestly I think they do a pretty good job sticking to that identity. Their entire catalog revolves around racing heritage, vintage, automotive, styling, and accessible enthusiast watches. And one thing I'll give them credit for is they offer a ton of different dial variations and colors, so if this specific configuration doesn't suit your taste, there are definitely other options available. As for the specs, you're looking at a 41mm stainless steel case. It's 13mm thick with a 46.5mm lug-to-lug measurement and a 20mm bracelet width. Water resistance is rated to 100 meters, which honestly makes this a pretty functional everyday watch. Now, one thing I definitely appreciate here is the use of a Mecha-Quartz movement. This watch uses a Japanese Mecha-Quartz chronograph caliber, and if you're unfamiliar with that style of movement, it's basically the best of both worlds. You get the accuracy and reliability of quartz, but the chronograph itself has a much more mechanical feel. The pushers have that satisfying click. The chronograph seconds hand sweeps smoothly instead of ticking awkwardly, and when you reset it, the hand snaps back instantly, just like a mechanical chronograph. And honestly, for an affordable racing style watch like this, I think Mecha-Quartz makes a lot of sense. You don't have to worry about servicing costs or accuracy issues, but you still get a functional chronograph experience. The dial itself is probably my favorite part of the entire watch. There's just so much depth. I really love the color combination of this particular version, and the play of colors works extremely well in person. It has a vintage racing vibe without looking overly fake or forced. The subdials are easy to read, and overall the symmetry is really clean. The Japanese applied lume is decent too. It's usable, but it's definitely not going to blow you away. This isn't one of those watches where you shut down the lights and the entire room lights up green. But for a racing chronograph in this price category, I think it's acceptable. Now moving on to the bracelet, this is definitely where I have mixed feelings. It's not terrible by any means, but it's also not the highlight of the watch. The overall finishing is decent enough for the price, but the stamp clasp is honestly my biggest complaint. It just doesn't feel as refined as the rest of the watch. I would have much rather seen Cadola either offer a better constructed clasp, maybe something milled, or honestly just lean into the vintage aesthetic and include a really nice leather rally strap or rubber strap instead, because the watch head itself actually feels much more premium than the bracelet suggests. The other thing worth mentioning is the weight. On size, this thing comes in at around 150 grams, so it's definitely not a lightweight watch. You feel it on the wrist. Personally, I think trimming some weight and improving the bracelet construction would elevate this watch significantly. Another complaint for me is the crystal. Unfortunately, this is still using a mineral crystal instead of sapphire. And honestly, in 2026, that's becoming harder for me to overlook. Sapphire is just more scratch resistant and gives a little more peace of mind for daily wear. Now, to be fair, the mineral crystal does help keep the price lower and gives it more of a vintage aesthetic, but I still think sapphire would have made this feel substantially more premium. Thickness is another thing that some people may notice. At 13mm stick, it's not outrageously chunky, but for a quartz powered watch, I do think it wears slightly thicker than expected. Some of that comes from the crystal profile itself, but thankfully the short lug to lug helps balance everything out nicely on the wrists. The good news though is the 20mm lug width makes this thing an absolute strap monster. I can already picture this watch on leather rally straps, rubber straps, suede, NATO straps. Honestly, this case design would pair really well with a ton of different options. And overall, I think that's really the story of this watch. It's a very fun, vintage-inspired everyday chronograph with a cool dial layout, solid construction for the money, good wrist presence, and a genuinely enjoyable Mecha-Quartz movement. Is it perfect? No. I think the mineral crystal and stamp clasp are legitimately weak points, but at the same time, for around $220, there's still a lot to appreciate here. And honestly, I think this is a type of watch that a lot of people could daily wear without worrying too much about it. It's functional, has 100 meters of water resistance, wears comfortably, and captures that vintage motorsport vibe really well. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Would you pick something like this over a more expensive mechanical chronograph? Or how do you guys feel about Mecha-Quartz movements in general? As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and of course subscribe to the channel because we're getting really close to 100,000 subscribers. As always, be safe out there and stay humble.